The Honourable Maurice Williamson.
Mr Speaker, I want to rise and take a call in the budget debate and start by putting a little bit of context around the budget, because it's the 24th budget I've sat through in this Parliament, sir, and I have to say that of the 24 I've known, probably only 3 short of your count, sir, the 24 I've known, it's the toughest circumstances that any finance minister has faced. And I always like to think of little analogies or parables, and if a father had told the family that when we get to Christmas I'm going to be buying you a 65-inch plasma TV for Christmas, and everyone was excited in the family, and as the year rolled on the father lost his job and the business they had went bankrupt or whatever, when it came Christmas time he'd have to say to the family, you know, we're in circumstances where I can't buy you that plasma screen. And what worries me intensely about the Labor Party's view of their catcalls all the time is they seem to have ignored that when the last election campaign got underway at the beginning of 2008 and we campaigned on a number of things, the world was a very different place. The world was an incredibly different place, and as the global economic crisis started to really bite and take out huge chunks of the world's economy, the share market in the United States took one of the biggest dives ever, the property market in the United States fell through the floor, we experienced the shockwaves right across the world, the pigs, Portugal, Ireland, Greece and Spain taking a real smack around, Iceland, Greece and Spain. And sir, here in New Zealand, the finance company meltdowns and the government guarantees that had been made to those started to change the entire landscape. And if it wasn't bad enough that the global economic crisis had meant that the whole world was now in a different world and a different paradigm, along came a number of Mother Nature's smack-arounds just to make us really realise where we were. And so I pay absolute unbelievable credit to the Honourable Bill English for what he did in this budget. Because, sir, he did not get into a slash and burn mentality. He did not get into a let's just tear the place to shreds. But what he did do was lay down what I think is a very solid foundation bedrock budget, which does a number of key things. Now, before I go into those key things, because I think it's worth rehearsing them for this House, I just want to say that in my own portfolio, I want to show some gratitude to the Minister of Finance, for at a time when most ministers were being told there is no new money, what part of no don't you understand, that the financial circumstances are such that I can't, the Bill English did see the reason to a number of cases we put forward to him, and I thank him for that. In one case we got some new money for the electronic smart gates at customs. And sir, that is a project I am enormously proud of. In recent weeks we've been getting over 60% of all eligible arrivals at the Auckland and Wellington and Christchurch airport using SmartGate as their alternative to arrival to using the manual desks, and the huge efficiency gains and saving of time which has allowed customs officers to direct their work at the secondary queue. That is where the bad eggs are, where the drug smugglers and all of the other evil people are. It's been a fantastic success, and Bill English gave us some new money in this budget for more smart gates, both for arrival and departure, and I thank him for that. We also inherited, sir, 2.5 years ago, a statistics department that was highly in a state of meltdown with regards to its technology platforms. Fully depreciated schemes that were so outdated, so many different variable platforms, and again, to go to a Minister of Finance in a times when there is plenty going on, it's still hard to convince them that statistics portfolio is what you'd call high on the radar scheme for New Zealand, but to convince the Minister at a time when things were tough, well, he saw the benefit. He saw the merits of what good economic statistics like GDP and household labour force surveys can mean for our planning, and we got a budget allocation of $58 million over the next 4 years for putting in place some new systems. So, having said that, let me return to what I said as the key things about it. So one of the headline-grabbing facts and figures that is used by the media, and I hear the opposition using it all the time, and it's a really sobering number, is that while we have our books based on where they are, the Finance Minister is having to borrow around $300 million a week. In fact, it's been 380 because the economic circumstances around the world in terms of the money markets has meant that it was worthwhile taking advantage of some of the deals going. And yes, some of that was in excess of the requirement, and we can argue around about the margins of whether that was the 300, the 310, 320 or indeed the 380 necessary, but 300 million a week. And I think that most New Zealanders, if they multiplied that by their 50 weeks, they soon work out what number of billions that is adding to our debt. So what did Mr English do in this budget? He set about putting us on a path to reducing that level of borrowing, and very rapidly. And I think this is a headline that's worthwhile repeating. Currently borrowing 300 million, and yet average borrowings will fall by over 2/3 to around 100 million in the next financial year. That's 2011-2012. And the government will start repaying debt 2 years later, that is 2014-15. Now, sir, I know that most New Zealanders who have had tough times at home, who have struggled to make their family budget work, know what we are talking about. Yes, this is not the times of plenty. There were times when Labour was in power, when the world was booming, the world economy was in just jubilant mood, and commodity prices were going through the ceiling, and there was no end to tomorrow. In the United States, money was flowing through the share market, and the Dow Jones knew no top. Labour turned in some years where there was $11.5 billion surplus. Well, New Zealanders know that the world is not like that at present. Yes, the economic cycle will come back, and one day there will be a better economic times for the entire world. But, sir, Mr English recognised that and did something about it. He also recognised that there's only one way to get yourself out of trouble long term, and that's economic growth. Every family knows that it's no good sitting around whinging and complaining that they actually can't afford this or can't afford that. The best thing they can do is try to increase their income, increase their wealth, increase their financial position. And in this budget, sir, Mr English and Treasury's numbers, based on the books that Bill English delivered to this House, we're looking at a 4% growth in the GDP of this country in 2012. And the resulting of flowing of 170,000 new jobs by 2015. Now, again, this is where the difference between the Labour Party and the National Party really the rubber hits the road. You hear it when questions from Jacinda Ardern and others about how many jobs is the government creating. And, sir, the government, other than when Labour was in power and created a huge number of bureaucrats within the concrete towers around our buildings here, the government actually doesn't create many jobs at all. We do employ a few people in our offices and a few people in the ministries and the bureaucracy, but the vast bulk of jobs out there are in the private sector. They are created by risk takers who put their own money at risk, who put their own skin in the game, and who actually invest to grow the economy overall and make some money. And, sir, they will take on staff. It's a really simple model. It's really simple. They will take on staff if they have some confidence that the economy is on the up, that their products will have customers, that their books will look in good shape and black ink, and they'll be able to retire some of the debt to the bank. And what this budget will have done is restored a very big chunk of business confidence, restored a very good view of the future to New Zealanders, and that is why Treasury say with that confidence boost you'll get from this budget, you can be looking at Treasury's advice to the government is that we can be looking at about 170,000 new jobs by 2015. Jobs created by the private sector, sir, not created by employing a much fatter and greater bureaucracy. Now, Mr English did have to trim some elements of various programs because they were just not sustainable. What was done to KiwiSaver, the $1,000 was left. A whole range of the elements in KiwiSaver was still left. There was an increase in the amount of private savings required and a reduction in the government contribution, and overall savings will increase because of it. And that is something New Zealand has to focus on. Mr Speaker, I just want to say in the last 20 or so seconds I've got that of 24 years that I've sat in here and I've tried to assess a budget against its times. And sir, this was the toughest time ever to be having to put a budget together, and Mr English delivered what I think is a superlative budget. The opposition is struggling to try and find things that they can say against it. I give him a 9.9 out of 10, and it's simply because you should never give a 10 out of 10 in case there's room for improvement. I'm delighted to be a member of this government and support his budget, sir.